Let's talk about the word create. We use it all the time, right? We create art, we create solutions, we create families, but what are we really doing when we create? Are we making something out of absolute total nothingness, or is it something else? Today, we're diving into a question that puts two completely different realities head-to-head. Was the universe created, or was it organized?
I mean, think about it for a second. When you build a house, you gather up wood, glass, steel, bricks, all that stuff. You don't just snap your fingers and have it appear out of thin air. You take materials that already exist, and you arrange them, you organize them into a new form. This really simple analogy, well, it's at the very heart of a huge theological debate.
Now, the most common answer, especially in Western religion, is a concept called creation ex nihilo. It's just Latin for out of nothing. And the idea is pretty powerful, that before creation there was nothing. Literally, no space, no time, no matter. Just nothing. And then God spoke, and all of it came into being. For centuries, this has been the absolute bedrock of Orthodox Christian belief.
And here's where things get really interesting. What if that's not the original story? According to the source material for this explainer, if you start digging into the history of this idea, creation from nothing might not be nearly as ancient as we all assume. Which, of course, leads to a huge question. Where did this doctrine actually come from?
Okay, so check out this timeline from our source. It's kind of wild. It suggests that the earliest biblical texts, like Genesis, actually describe God bringing order to pre-existing chaos. There was a formless void and dark waters. The stuff was already there. But the idea of creation from nothing, ex nihilo, it doesn't even show up in Christian writings until almost 2 centuries after Christ. So what happened? The source points a finger directly at the heavy influence of Greek philosophy on early Christian thinkers.
So at the end of the day, we're left with two completely different ways of seeing this. As the slide breaks it down, you've got the original Hebraic view, ex materia, out of matter, which pictures God as this divine craftsman, working with materials that have always existed. Then you have the later, Greek-influenced view, ex nihilo, which sees God as this unbounded source who creates matter itself. It's a huge shift from a craftsman to, well, a kind of cosmic magician, and that change has massive implications.
So, with all that historical context in mind, our source material introduces an alternative. And it's not a new idea, not at all. It's framed as bringing back a really old one that got lost along the way.
This brings us to a teaching from Joseph Smith. Back in the 19th century, he offered this really starkly different definition. He claimed that the Hebrew word we often translate as create actually means to organize, to arrange, or to put in order. Now, this wasn't just him being a grammar nerd, it was a complete reframing of God's entire relationship with the universe.
Let's go back to our house analogy, because it makes this super clear. Okay, so we organize wood and steel into a house. But that wood was itself organized by a tree, right? Using sunlight, water, nutrients, and those nutrients were already organized elements in the soil. If you follow that logic all the way down, every act of creation we see is really just an act of reorganizing matter that was already there to begin with.
Now you might be thinking, okay, this is all just deep theological, philosophical stuff. But this is where the source material throws a real curveball and brings modern physics into the ring.
Think about this for a second. The teaching is that matter is eternal, that it can't be created or destroyed. And doesn't that sound familiar? It's basically the law of conservation of mass energy, one of the most fundamental laws in all of physics. It's a cornerstone of thermodynamics, and it says that the total amount of matter and energy in the universe is constant. It just changes form.
And what about the very beginning? The Big Bang. So many of us think of it as the moment of creation from nothing, but that's not what the model actually says. It describes the incredibly rapid expansion and transformation of an unbelievably hot, dense, pre-existing state into the organized cosmos we live in today. So modern cosmology describes a universe that began in form, not one that began its existence. So the key point the source makes isn't that physics proves this theology. Not at all. It's that the conceptual framework, the very logic of modern physics, with its eternal energy and its transformations from a pre-existing state, it seems to rhyme surprisingly well with this idea of creation as organization. Way more than it rhymes with creation from absolutely nothing.
This strange alignment brings us to the biggest question of all. If that older, Hebraic model seems to resonate so well with modern science, why did the ex nihilo, out-of-nothing model become so dominant? This pulls the debate out of physics and back into the very nature of faith itself.
And the source argues that this whole debate really comes down to two competing models for truth. As you can see here, one model, creedal Christianity, builds its truth on tradition, on preserving what was decided in historical councils. The other, the restored gospel, claims to bypass all that tradition and tries to restore original truths through direct, continuing revelation.
From the perspective of our source material, this shift from organize to create from nothing isn't some minor, dusty theological detail. No, it's presented as the smoking gun, primary evidence of what it calls a great apostasy, a fundamental break where, allegedly, human philosophy and tradition were elevated above original, revealed doctrines.
And that leaves all of us with a final, really challenging question to chew on. Regardless of which definition of create you lean toward, this whole journey kind of forces us to ask, how do we tell the difference between a foundational truth and just a really, really old tradition? If something this fundamental is up for debate, what does that mean for how we find truth in all the other areas of our lives?